Hello, everyone. Oh, yes, nice. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Holistic Climate Solutions Summit, hosted at the Tsuji Center for Compassionate Relief. I'm delighted to welcome you to day 6 of our 7-day summit, exploring the various solutions that we can take today, here, and now to address the climate crisis in a holistic and robust manner, leaving no one behind. It's my pleasure to introduce our next panel, which is exploring how we can confront plastics through a strategic and ethical response. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our moderator, Andrew Schwartz from the Center for Earth Ethics, to take us away.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our friends online. It is a real pleasure to be here, to be part of the summit. And also, Steve, you've put on 6 days of programming, which is absolutely incredible. Congratulations to you and to wow. And thanks for creating this space. I think for me, this is Climate Week has been intense. This is Saturday. I know we're all tired. I'm amazed that you all made it out here. And I'm so grateful that you did. This has been a week of friendship and joy. It's also been a really intense look at the climate crisis, what needs to happen, where are we going, what do we need to do. And I just want to express gratitude for being here in this space with you all to think holistically about what's happening, where are we going together, and to be in this space with one another. Today, obviously, we're talking about plastic, and it's not an easy conversation. Like, it's very tough. I know Alyssa, who's in the audience, we do a lot of research on plastic together, and we almost have to do these like spiritual debriefs when we get done to kind of check in, because this problem is so massive, it's so pervasive, it's very intimidating as we look at what the future is. I know, for instance, one thing that got me as we look at the impacts of health from the petrochemicals that are used in these processes to create plastics, that if we carry on at our current pace, the world could be chemically infertile by 2040, you know? And so we're looking at this deep existential risk that threatens the efficacy of our species going forward, as well as the other species in this world whose genetic processes are being disrupted by all these chemicals. And so we have this out there problem. We're looking at what's coming down the road, and it's very intimidating, but we also have this back home problem. And I know, Jane, you've worked on this as well, but there are communities that are sacrificed in order to create these plastics. I think especially about the Gulf South, St. James Parish in Louisiana. It's also known as Cancer Alley, right? Because the people there are 50 times more likely to get cancer because of all the petrochemical plants that surround them. And so we need to also hold in tension the deep racism and exploitation that facilitates this system of violence and destruction. And so we know about what's happening in the world. We know what's going on with our oceans. We know what's going on with microplastics being found high in the atmosphere and deep in our blood. We know that this problem is pervasive. And one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation as part of Climate Week is because so often we just kind of lose sight, or we just only focus on the waste or the trash or the oceans. But this is a full cycle. This is a circular cycle that begins at the beginning and ends at the end. And I want to address how the plastic pollution problem is also a climate crisis issue. And so on that, I want to introduce our incredible panel. I want to start with Yupa Stein, who is in Montana. Hello. I'm so glad you're here. She works with Beyond Plastics. I'm also thrilled to introduce Kevin Patel, who is the founder and director of One Up Action. We've got Jane Eisenhart, who is a communications consultant with UNEP, the UN Environment Program. And then Alex Tan, assistant professor at Tsinghua University, who came all the way from Taiwan, which is awesome. And so thank you all for being here. I'm going to start with a question for all of you. And Yupa, please kick us off here. And can you just share from your vantage point, from the work that, oh, you're over there. From your vantage point and the work you're doing, how do you see the plastic issue? What are you focusing on? And just kind of help us get an overview of kind of the enormity of this issue. Over to you.
Sure. So I'm going to share my screen and make sure that we're on the same. You can see. Can you see my screen? It has a slide of Holistic Climate Solutions Summit. Hello? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see your screen. Hey. There we go.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Nailed it.
Or Andrew, can you hear me?
Yep, we can see you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. Yes, we can see you, Yuba.
You can see my screen?
Oh, yeah, you got us muted.
I don't know if there's a delay.
Yeah, we can see you. Sorry, we accidentally were muted. So you're all good to go. Take us away.
Screen okay?
Yep, we can see it.
Andrew, can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, we can.
So thank you so much. It's great to be joining you. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to the Tsuji Center for Compassionate Relief, the Center for Earth Ethics, and Parliament of the World's Religion for bringing us together. As Andrew mentioned, I am a volunteer with the national organization Beyond Plastics in support of their work to end plastic pollution. I'm an artist and a concerned citizen. I live in Northwest Montana on the Flathead Reservation of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes on the traditional homelands of the Pend Oreille and Salish tribes. So sometimes, as Andrew mentioned, it can be a bit overwhelming to take in the enormity of what's happening with plastic and climate change. I can relate to the character in this cartoon. She said, "My desire to be well informed is currently at odds with my desire to remain sane." So thank you, companions, for being here. May we all work toward compassionate sanity. So I want to start with the foundation for why we must end plastic pollution and its contribution to climate change. David Boyd's book, The Rights of Nature, gets to the heart of the matter. Humans are but one species among millions, as biologically dependent as any other on the ecosystems that produce water, air, food, and a stable climate. Plastic contaminates our water, air, and food, and decreases climate stability. At the core of plastic pollution and climate disruption is the mistaken belief that Earth's resources are infinite, and that as humans, we have a right to use them for our benefit, even when resulting harmful consequences are often directly borne by vulnerable lives and ecosystems, whose voices and stories are often not being heard or considered. As Andrew mentioned, everywhere we have looked on the planet, we find plastic. From the tops of high, remote mountains to the deepest ocean, the Mariana Trench, where nearly 7 miles down, researchers found that 72% of the amphipods they studied contained plastic fibers and fragments in their guts. Each of us is breathing in and ingesting a credit card's worth of plastic a week, adding up to 40 pounds in a lifetime. We found plastic in beer, salt, earthworms, apples, and in human blood and placentas, and deep in the lungs of living humans. About 99% of plastics are made by combining chemicals and fossil fuels. On a side note, most human-made chemicals are made from fossil fuel byproducts produced by the petrochemical industry. So it's all very connected. many of the largest and most hazardous chemical families, including heavy metals, flame retardants, phthalates, bisphenols, fluorinated compounds, are used to make plastics. And in the process, posing risks to areas such as recycling and posing health risks to all life on the planet. Plastic also pollutes at every stage, from fossil fuel extraction to what happens to it after it is used. And in the process, disproportionately harms people of color and people in economically depressed areas around the world. It is important to remember the harm caused by plastic at every stage, because often proposed solutions, as Andrew said, are often only looking at plastic waste. So plastics, whether they start out tiny, such as microfibers released from clothing, or whether they start out larger, like plastic water bottles, degrade into smaller and smaller pieces or components, but never biodegrade and become a beneficial part of life cycles. Plastic also contributes to climate change at every stage. The report Plastic and Climate projects the annual emissions from the stages of the plastic life cycle, reaching the equivalent of 615 coal plants by 2050. The plastics industry's greenhouse gas emissions are on track to surpass those of coal-fired power in the US by 2030. For more information on this topic, Beyond Plastics has published a report, The New Coal, Plastics and Climate Change, which is available on their website. So since 1950, we've produced over 9 billion tons of plastic, over half of which has been produced after 2004. 6.3 billion tons has become plastic waste. 40% of current production is for single-use purposes. Plastic production and waste is growing at an accelerated pace. As we move away from reliance on fossil fuels for energy production and transportation, plastic production is the fossil fuel industry's plan B. It's going to take all of us working from a local to the global level. It's going to take governments to regulate, businesses to innovate, and individuals to act. We need to stop the greenwashing and false solutions. We can't recycle our way out of this mess. Incineration and so-called advanced recycling technologies are not the answer. We need to stop the toxic overproduction of single-use and unnecessary plastics. We need to pressure big brands to switch their business models to refill and reuse. We need to support a regenerative, circular economy. And we need to support actions that stop the harm and injustice at all stages of plastics. As humans, we have responsibilities in our kinship with the web of life that makes our lives possible. Our health depends on a healthy, regenerative, just, diverse, and vibrant Earth. So that's a short, condensed version of the overview of plastics that from my perspective. I'll stop screen sharing here.
Wow. Thank you, Yupa. Are we muted still? Are we good to go? All right, great. I know you have a 35-minute presentation, and the fact that you cut that down to 6 minutes is incredible. So congratulations. Also horrifying, the one with the snowflake and the little plastic filament. I mean, wow. And so thanks for setting the stage. And I do think the enormity of the problem, right, is one of those things that can, it stops us. And I think that's what happens a lot of times in this work. It's so big that you wonder, well, what can we do? And so that's kind of where we want to go, right? And so I want to kick it over to you, Kevin, because you work a lot with local communities. You're working on climate change issues. I think what y'all are doing, I was looking through your website again today. It's awesome. And so I would love just to hear from you kind of at that community level as you look at this issue, how are you seeing it?
Yeah, I guess it starts with, making sure that we're actively, storytelling, and the conversation starts around this plastic pollution. Just making sure that we're getting the facts and the data out there, and the stories of, like, startling, like, just the amount of plastics that can be found every single where, you know. And if we don't get those stories out there, no one will act on this issue, right? So I think a lot of young people, I work with mainly the youth sector, and a lot of young people are quite, right when they're awakened to the facts, and they get to see the data, they get to see the the pictures for themselves, they say that this is an issue. This is an issue that needs to be solved. This is an issue that needs to be acted on, and the way that they're acting is by coming up with a solution. So I see, a lot of solutions from the beach cleanup side of things, where a lot of students tend to go up and, wanting to do plastic, pollution cleanup, so via the beaches. And doing it the right way, where they shift through the sand, they go through everything. It's just amazing to see how much dedication young people really put into understanding these complex issues, to the more scientific solutions, to actually removing microplastics and nanoplastics from the oceans. So really coming up with those types of solutions. Young people are leading in both the action-oriented way, but they're also leading in a way that is coming up with the solutions to completely get rid of microplastics and nanoplastics from the oceans. And so I think that's been so eye-opening for me to see, of like how our communities, specifically young people, are acting on the issues of plastic. But I think there needs to be more work done around the storytelling and the conversations around plastics, because it's such an important issue to highlight. Not only that, but give young people the resources to say, hey, this is the way that we act. I know that there's a bit of nuance on the plastic pollution or the plastics issue right now, given that we, not a lot of people are willing to say to get rid of plastics completely, given that a lot of fields, like the medical field, uses plastics. And I completely agree with that. But I think there are other nuances of where we can kind of step in and say there is time for progression, there is time for action, and there's the solutions to really kind of vent these, products or whatnot that we're using and whatnot. But yeah, I think what I've seen is that a lot of young people are ready to take action. I think they just need the resources to do so.
Thank you so much. And I think that's there's this piece of innovation, and I know there's a lot of social entrepreneurship. Alex, I know you've kind of stepped in some of these entrepreneurial, creative impacts. But as we kind of get the full scope and the full breadth of what's happening, I think there's the creativity in this movement, and also just this this is what we have now, so what can we do? And I think it's a completely different approach of a generation saying I don't want to live in this worst case scenario, so I'm going to hustle super hard and look for what we can achieve and be very creative and innovative about it. But I also want to talk a little bit, and moving to you, Jane, you're with UNEP. They had this huge plastic treaty, that came out in March. So there's this weird moment where, as scary and intimidating as the present is right now, and as the future looks, there's also this exciting element to being right now. We've got the Inflation Reduction Act that just passed. We've got this plastic treaty that's got 2 years. So can you kind of, from where you've sat, because you've been deep in the mix that way, for the last week. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a frame set, and then from your perspective, because you've also worked, in the Gulf South, so you've got this local to global perspective all right here. So can you kind of share a little bit from your space how you're seeing things?
Sure, thank you. So first, I kind of want to build on the storytelling element that I think is really important, because there's such a community health angle here at all levels, globally, locally, nationally. And I think the storytelling is important for showing that the world can look different and for people to know your community doesn't have to look this way. And we see it here in New York. I bet everyone here today had to sidestep trash walking into this event. And we know it can be different, and I think a lot of communities are looking for the resources to see how to act and to see that the future can and will be better. So it's really exciting now with the plastic pollution conversation that I've seen, as Andrew mentioned, at the local level up to the global level, how this momentum is really there for change, like the appetite is real. And this year it's been really exciting because at the UN Environment Assembly in February, so the 5th UNEA, member states came together and discussed that we really want to have a legally binding instrument to reduce plastic pollution and the whole life cycle of plastics. So it's targeting not just reducing and recycling, but also building more circular economies, giving people the technological capacity, and building at the local level to really address this problem. So it's been really exciting to see this momentum there globally, and right now the process is moving forward where member states are establishing an international negotiating committee, so an INC, that will start meeting in the fall. And that's going to be where we really start planning like what this will look like, how it'll be done, how it'll be enforced, how it'll be measured, and really how within the next few years we can make a really big structural change. But in addition to this conversation growing at the global level, I've been really fortunate in my work to see this at the regional and federal level, but also the subnational level. And I think what's neat about these big moments like UNEA, yes, it's exciting that we're gonna have a big treaty, but really it was like a catalyst for this conversation of like, this is an issue that we're getting behind. People can have the resources to care about this. And now at the federal level too, we've seen the US EPA come up with a new recycling strategy that is also talking about circularity. So this conversation's growing, it's really getting support, and it's trickling down to the mayors that I've been working with along the Mississippi River who are also able to take action locally in their communities. So this multi-stakeholder engagement is really cool to see, and these webs of support are getting stronger and stronger. And I think, yeah, it's just a moment that we need to really take a grasp on and see how it moves forward.
I love that. Like, yeah, this moment, and I think that is like, we were talking upstairs earlier. I feel like I've been in the climate movement for almost 10 years. And I think I've gotten so good at spinning loss and finding ways to say, well, it's, you know, like how you just get so comfortable with losing. And so to kind of be in this space, in this time, in this place where the tools are different, where the momentum is different, where the acknowledge is different, like it is this time to really say, all right, we've got to hold on to it, we've got to grasp it, and we've got to make moves in the different way. And so I want to move to you, Alex. And I know you've got a presentation that we want to pull up because you work at this large system level. You know, you're an assistant professor, you do a lot of research around sustainability and technology. And so excited to move towards you and kind of get your take on all this.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Yes. So can I have the slide, please? Yes, next slide. Yes. So it's about storytelling. Yes, but in addition to that, we need to look at the profound systematic change in order to change individual behavior. So let me share two stories with everyone. Yes, next. Yeah. This is the Eye technology, a startup by the Tsuji Foundation. So we streamline the entire recycling process so that when the PET bottles, when they are recycled, we have the volunteers who do the decapping and removing the bottle strings, and the rest of the PET bottles, they will be cut, they will be washed, and then they will be spin into textile products and later into clothes and bags. Well, we did the entire technology so that whenever the PET bottles are recycled, they will be actually put into reusable products that we can use in everyday life. Well, that technology is not new. That technology is actually quite mature, but for many years we are not able to put it into mass production. Why? That first two steps, the capping and the removing of the ring of the PET bottles, that required manpower. Now, till date, no machine is able to do that. So in other countries in the US, the labor intensive, actually the cost actually put it almost impossible to be carried out. But in the Tzu Chi Foundation, next slide, what we do is that we have volunteers who are willingly to do it manually. We have elderly who believe that compassion for the planet is something that they put it into practice. So we have volunteers who actually appear at the recycling center daily to do that manual task of removing the rings, removing the cap, washing the PET bottles before they are sent into factories for reproduction. So that is the compassion technology that we believe that we have to practice, that encourage everyone that we can put the PET bottles into better use. Well, as the other speakers mentioned, recycling is no longer very such. It is important, but the more important is to actually get it out of the system. Do not use. That is the most important step right now. So next, what we did is that the Tzu Chi Foundation have about 7 hospitals in Taiwan. So I have the opportunity to do a research with our medical staff to understand what are the factors that actually influenced the healthcare personnel to carry out, to actually not use plastic in their working environment. So we did a few studies, some survey, and what we found out next, yes, is that the environmental awareness is actually very high. Everyone know what is going on, but they are just not putting it into action. Next, yeah, you can see that the 5 points Likert scale, knowledge, they can score 4.72, is very high. But if you come to attitude, you come to behavior, the score keep going, keep dropping. That our medical personnel know what is going on, but they are just not having the impulse to actually go and change their personal environmental behavior. So next, so we did an assessment and we realized that yes, next. Attitude, they have an attitude. So those numbers we found through the behavior theory, those numbers should range from 0 to 1. So the higher the number, the greater the influence of the factor. We found that attitude almost have no influence because everyone know what is going on, but they are just not putting it into action. We found that subjective norm, the peer pressure doesn't make a difference. It seems that in the healthcare sector, recycling or actually saying no to plastic is a very personal choice. Your peer pressure doesn't make any difference. That the greatest influence actually came from the ethical leadership. That's why we say the ethical response. Ethical leadership with the perceived behavior control. What does it mean? Your boss, your manager, actually out of ethical consideration, say no to plastic, and that leading by example actually will cause an influence to let the healthcare personnel understand that it can be done. My boss is doing that out of ethical concern. Then it can be done. It's not that difficult. I can give it a try and I can find that it can be done. So that is a very scientific response that we found that that should be the way in the healthcare sector. Next. So what we did is that we found that's quite successful in the Tzu Chi Foundation hospital. We found that our staff, after working for 2 years, the management leading by example, there is some behavioral change. Yes, it's more statistically significant that we no longer use disposable utensils. Next, then we have a program. We actually lead the APP program for about a month. That way, the management of the hospital lead by example to encourage everyone to record their saying no to plastic movement. Next, so we can see that we did some systematic understanding. So next, every single day our staff will actually record. If they say no to plastic bags, did they say no to plastic utensils? Did they say no to plastic cups? And they record it down daily. And we have the aggregation of information. We let them know that every single step, how much carbon you are reducing. Yes, next. So we have actually feedback. We let everyone know, remind them that you need to fill in your information daily. We have gamification. Those are through very systematic literature review to realize that these are useful. It will help the user actually get encouraged to carry out the action. Next. Yeah, so we have the gamification, the APP, where the amount of carbon that they reduce will actually encourage a tree to grow, blossoms, and etc. Come next. So we can see that for over a month, the average healthcare personnel, these are the amount of carbon dioxide that we managed to save. Yeah, so next, then we can see that statistically after 15 days, it becomes a habit. Yes, the amount of actually carbon saved actually stabilized, becomes significant, statistically significant, and it continues to the end of the month. Come next. Yes, so we can see that it is important and it can be done. We have a systematic, strategic, ethical response in the healthcare sector. We can let everyone adopt a more pro-environmental behavior and by saying no to plastic. Thank you.
That's so cool. It's really great. No, thank you so much. And I think there's this piece. I remember you talk about leadership. So Corinna, who's my boss, and she's the founder of our organization, this was years ago. I would come into the office and I'd have a sandwich and it'd be wrapped in plastic. And she's like, "What are you doing? What is this?" And just refuses to have. And it's one of those things where you knew it was bad, but it took that kind of for me, and this there was this trickle down in my own life where I was like, we can't have anything plastic in the house. There's no, single use things, but it does come from this place of you've got to know why this is so bad. And there is that deeper, because it's so easy, and ease is, a slippery slope down to destruction. And so when you actually have that next layer, that next step of the ethical moral response, it allows us to get to where we want to go. And so I want to kind of move in that direction with you, Kevin, around this kind of, as you look at the work that you're doing with youth and around the world, how are you seeing this integration of this ethical call or this moral call for our own health, but also the health of the planet as we look at the years and generations come, as we look at the need in behavior change?
Of course. I work with an organization. I'm a youth ambassador for plastic pollution. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. Yeah, so I'm a youth ambassador for Plastic Pollution Coalition, and they're an organization that I want to make sure I get it right, but it's an organization and nonprofit that it works on the communications and advocacy around plastic pollution on a global, extensive rate with a lot of organizations, businesses, and individuals to create a more just, equitable, and regenerative world free from plastics, obviously, and its toxic impacts. And from what I see is that a lot of young people who are youth ambassadors really take the ethical response from what is causing this problem, right? We all know what is causing it. It's a petrochemical industry, right? And that's derived from the fossil fuels. A lot of young people are sick and tired of the fossil fuel industry, causing so much harm to not only marginalized communities, but communities around the globe. And I think when we're looking at the ethical issue of this, it's coming from the moral standpoint that communities are already being affected. It's not happening in the next 2 or 3 years, or not the next 5 or 6 years, right? A lot, like most people tend to think. It's happening now. It's happening right in our backyards. It's happening in Black, brown, indigenous peoples of color's backyards. The petrochemical industry, the fossil fuel industry, a lot of these industries are literally driving the climate crisis, and we already understand that. And it's been talked about so much, and I love the panelists here because not only are they bringing such a different perspective here to this conversation, but it also kind of inspires me to be like, oh wow, I didn't know that. Let me take that into my practice, and let me talk about that with other young people. How can I get that information out there? And so I think, yes, we're being affected by it. Us young people are already understanding the effects of it, but we take that and use that as motivation to really turn our anger and our passion into action. And the way that we do that is making sure that we're advocating for, laws, as well as just the motions that you guys are all working on, as well as just anything and everything that possible to make sure that plastics can we can, really kind of shift from plastics. I have young people here who understand really well, from my team from One Up Action. By the way, I'm going to shout out One Up Action right here, who understand and work with so many young people who are working on the issue of plastics, whether that be on the scientific level or on a localized level. So it's been very, kind of motivational for me to kind of keep going on that end. I don't know. I'm just kind of always inspired by that. It's also a very early morning, so I do apologize, y'all. But I don't know. It's like, what more can I say? It's like, this issue is such a huge issue. We all know that the petrochemical industry and the plastics industry wants to continue because it's derived from fossil fuels, but we also know that there's a lot of hope and optimism coming from young people and just people in general. This is an intergenerational issue. This is an intersectional issue. We all know that. And we're all acting on it by telling the stories, by telling the facts, and seeing what alternatives and what solutions can be implemented now to really get the just future, get justice for all our communities that are being affected right now. So, yeah.
I love the love. And the compassion. There's this quote from Maya Angelou that she said, "Love is a condition so powerful, and maybe that which holds the stars in the firmament, and maybe that pushes and urges the blood in the veins. You have to have courage to love someone or something or this place, because you risk everything in doing it." And I think as we look at the future, there is this risk and there is this love of life and this conditionality to be angry in the right way. And I think there's that expression of anger that is propelling this moment, because you're right, it is here right now. I know it's not this 10-year play, and it is a 10 and 20-year play, but it's also right here. And that impact and that effect can lead anger towards bitterness, or can they aim it towards action? And so I think that piece, that ethical piece, that love piece, that moral piece is so important. And I want to go to you, Yupa, because I think one of the things, as we were talking and learning more about the work that you do, is the artistry, right? And this expression of how can we use art? How can we use culture? Because so much of this gets caught in this very technical response or, systemic response. But how, for you, have you used your art both as a moment of catharsis, perhaps, but also as a way to help motivate the kind of individual and systemic change that we need to see?
Great, thanks. I'm going to share my screen again.
All right, we're on the job. It's a black screen. Okay, I see flowers now. You're looking great.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Many of you have probably seen this photograph, but for me as a mother, as a human, when I saw this photograph of an albatross mother feeding plastic to her chick, it inspired me to look at what actions I can take, and look at what skills, what passion, what love I have to bring. And I think that's really important, to find what is in you, what skills do you bring. And I work in photography and in sculpture. And one of the things that I love, and I think starting with what we love, whether it's a child and concern for their future, or whether it's water or frogs or whatever it is that you love, that you embrace that love and bring it into your action. And so water was one of the places that I started, because I love water. And as I started researching and looking at in the research, a group called Environment Montana looked at 50 took 50 samples of water bodies around Montana, which is a relatively clean environment, and found that 66% of the water samples contained one or more types of microplastics. And so for me, that led to a greater journey of understanding kind of more about plastic. But then I was also looking at how do I express my experience, and I really appreciated people talking about the importance of storytelling, and what I think the arts are a powerful means for humans to tell stories. And when I was making this mask out of alder bark and pieces from a plastic blue water bottle, I was thinking about how the plastic is now part of our biological systems. I made this dress from a collection of plastics that had no place to go after use. I was collecting plastic in my small home, and it was just that enormity of it in a physical way in my life. There's also this the wonder of plastic and the seduction of the convenience of plastic, and what are the different ways that we can, along with these horrific, abhorrent realities of what plastic is doing to life on the planet. There's also this other side of kind of the seduction and the bright colors and the convenience of plastic. So I am curious and exploring that in my work. And trying to find ways to bring all of these different ways of storytelling and the science and the facts, and bring that to actions. One of the reasons I think I am working with Beyond Plastics is their focus on education and how do we tell the story. I was talking to someone who's been using political action through policy and regulation change for 30 years. He worked on tobacco issues, and he was talking about first people have to understand the why it's a problem. And I think the arts have a lot to bring to helping communicate why it's a problem. I testified last legislative session in Montana. I started to work locally to look at what we can do as a community to slow this outpouring of plastic in our community. But the legislation, legislation was passed to a preemptive ban to ban all bans, local bans of any auxiliary containers, and which includes single-use plastics. So local action in local municipalities is not an option right now. So then I started looking in larger ways, how do we take action, finding organizations, communities that are a fit for you, that have resources that you can utilize, building that web of connection. So we're not inventing the wheel, is really important. So that's a little bit.
Thank you. And I truly believe, and I'm glad you said it, like speaking to the horror and destruction, I really do believe that the creation of beauty is the antidote to horror. And that in these times, it is so important to remember how and why the earth is beautiful, and to create moments, whether it's through art or song or dance or whatever it is, opportunities to remember the beauty and to remember the love, and to use that as a binding agent to be that firmament from which we do what we do, because otherwise it's just really sad. And so on moving from this hyper local, I want to come to you, Jane, really at this global piece. And you touched on this plastic treaty before, and for you, from your perspective, both from kind of what you saw here in Climate Week and then knowing that these negotiations are moving forward, Can you share a little bit just on like the variety of stakeholders that are going to be a part of this, and where do you see this going, and how can those of us in this room who are online be supportive and really amplifying what this is and the import of it within our own communities and organizations?
Sure, yeah. Before I go into this global level, I kind of want to touch on the love just because I heard a really good quote this week from another activist and panelist, Aisha. She was saying that we really just need to love ourselves. Like, that's the baseline. If we care about ourselves and we believe we have a future and that love is there, then that's worth taking action for, and we're obviously not doing that enough with the state of the world and the things that we're facing. So I think with that, there's us needing to look out for ourselves and our communities, but globally, yeah, there's a lot going on. And in addition to the plastics treaty, there's also the UN just recognized the right to a healthy environment, which connects so well to this, because it's not just that we need to clean up the environment and our natural spaces, but every human has the right to live in a beautiful place, a safe place, a prosperous place, and a place where you can live a healthy and fulfilling life. And so I think these two things are really important momentum building pieces going forward, and resources that people can pull on for looking for solutions and also really advocating for communities. For the plastics treaty, there's so many different angles to get involved. So as I mentioned before, this is all very new. It just started in February. Like, conversations have been happening for a while, but the actual like building of what this legally binding treaty will look like is happening now. So where we are with things is there's the INC's meeting later this year, and they're going to start negotiating what this looks like, and that's mostly with member states. But stakeholders at all levels will be consulted, and there will be processes from the regional and local levels up to federal levels and up to global levels. So just keeping an eye out for these opportunities. The UN really works with a wide range of stakeholders, from civil society. NGOs play a massive part in this. Academia is so important for getting science and meeting our targets. And so I think just like always keeping those channels open of information sharing with our own networks of when there are opportunities to have dialogues and conversations, but also contributing pieces to policy and science, but also following UN's networks. So we really try to keep up to date on our social media platforms, our websites, and UNEP is really trying to push out these tools and resources for communities, but also for organizations. So I think just really trying to keep in touch with all of our organizational resources is really critical right now, and just continuing these conversations. But all levels, I think we're really looking for not just solutions, but inputs for needs of what we need from this agreement, because we've seen treaties are created and then they aren't always successful. And this is a new opportunity to do it better. And so we want it to really hold people accountable, but it's not just looking at the end result of plastics, like it's that whole journey along the way. So that's incorporating people, how they're impacted, production, the connection to other environmental crises, but ultimately, yeah, just building more circular economies. So, yes.
Thank you so much. And so, Alex, I'm going to finish with you, and then we're going to open up for Q&A. We were shockingly like pretty close to being on time, which I'm very excited about, even with a late start. So we're going to bleed a little bit over an hour. So please forgive us for that. And if you need to go, we get it. But Alex, what Suu Kyi has done in this top-down ethical response, I just want to get your reflection on, you know, it's worked so well in Suu Kyi, and how can you see this being modeled in other organizations, and what's worked for Suu Kyi especially that you think can be exported to other groups who want to see similar sort of outcomes, whether it's in their organization, in their faith community, or anything like that, to really help create this systemic change within an organization?
Okay, sure. We did think about this for quite a while. So as mentioned, we are from the Suu Kyi Foundation. Suu Kyi actually in Mandarin it's two Chinese characters. If you convert it into English, it actually means compassion relief. So we put compassion right at our very core. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for your friends and relatives, and compassion for the environment. That's the very core ethical belief that actually drive us to go towards the saying no to plastic or caring for the environment. So, and we believe that compassion that should be spread across wherever NGO you are, for what countries, for what religion, or what faith. Yes, so it's like we believe that everyone have an inner pearl inside of within ourselves that is maybe collected dust. We just need compassion that can actually dust off all the dust, and the inner light of the pearl will shine. So what we need is actually just to actually get the correct way, systematic approach by putting compassion right at the core to actually induce everyone. Of course, storytelling makes a big difference, but we get the correct story that can touch the correct audience. We can get it to work. Yeah. So we believe that we have a scientific background. We put the compassion right at the center, and we get the correct storyline out. It can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you so much. And I want to open it up if there's any questions in the audience now for any of the panelists on what's been discussed so far. Steve has a microphone.
How are you guys? So my question's about policy and laws and the current state of affairs, and if maybe you could shed some light on where we're at. So my background is I'm here in New York, and I own a few coffee shops, and eliminating single-use plastic has been a big passion / frustration. It's like Professor said, people are aware, but that gap between awareness and action is often missing. And so one thing we've tried is right before COVID, eliminating all single-use coffee cups, and you had to bring in a reusable or buy one for $2. And then COVID happened, and reusables kind of was problematic because people were, we were also letting people borrow cups, and people didn't kind of want that. And then out of that frustration came this idea to put on our cups the local city council person's phone number that it said, final call to halt the climate catastrophe, call so-and-so and ask to ban all single-use cups. So I'm just curious, like, again, I don't know how effective this has been, because who even calls people anymore? And the next iteration might be something, more QR code or text-based, but where are we at in terms of local city councils going further than just plastic bags and just eliminating? Because I feel if there's one product people will adjust their behavior toward, it's coffee. And if it's, you can only have coffee, you bring your cup, maybe there's a shot. And Europe, you have to bring a bag to the supermarket, or everyone gives you dirty looks.
Right.
So yeah, if anyone could shed light on just the current policy stuff, locally, nationally, thank you.
Anybody want to take a shot at it? Yeah, Yupa, please. Oh, hold on.
Related to policy, but I wanted to let you know that Beyond Plastics published a report on a restaurant guide around single-use plastics. It's available on their website, and also today at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, there's a Zoom rollout of that guide with some speakers. So that might be of interest, and will be available if you can't be there right at 2. It'll also be available, and the restaurant guide is available. But I'll let someone else speak to policy.
So I can't really speak to New York level policy, but I just kind of wanted to add a comment of, I think so much we've been talking about is individual action, which is critical, it's important, and small businesses I'm still kind of grouping in with that too, because you're taking initiative in your local community. But I think with problems like the plastic pollution crisis, so often like we're faced with the pressure of fixing something that really ultimately isn't our fault. And consumption and production, yeah, there's behavioral changes that can be done there. I think we all see that we want and love stuff, and that's a problem. but also, like we were seeing with the images earlier, there's marketing and so many external factors pushing us to make these decisions that are easy, they're cheap, and in a lot of communities, it is the only option is to get plastic and to get cheap and fast plastic. And so I think we need to also remember that pushing our local government officials like you're talking about, and also like global leaders to take more structural, systematic change in the industry is critical. And I think there's definitely power in individual action, so I don't want to discount that. And I think I'm always trying to work to improve my sustainable lifestyle practices. But ultimately, it's so much bigger than us, and we need to remember that it's not just us.
Yeah, I wanted to add on. I think we need both, right? Individual and global action. I think we need more global action though, because a lot of industries kind of tend to blame it on individuals. But I think we're getting both, and I see it. I did want to touch on the local policy bit. I don't live in New York City, but there was a good GRIS article that said that there was two new bills aimed to reduce plastic pollution in New York State. So if you search up a GRIS article called Two New Bills Aimed to Reduce Plastic Pollution in New York State, it talks about Assembly Bill A10185, a concept known as Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR. And then it also talks about all these other bills and just talks about like the policy aspects of what is actually being implemented in the New York aspect. I know that in California currently there are a couple bills going through around plastics, and specifically around the petrochemical industry, which I would love to explore and really get involved with. But a lot of my work has been international and working with young people to write that policy to get implemented, and how are ways in which that, you know, we actually move and drive change and change the system from within. This like concept of like, oh, we're needing plastics, but in reality, are we really needing plastics? Also, I wanted to touch on a bit from earlier on. You said love, you know, how we need love. And I think love is justice, you know. I think that is something that we have to remember, is like the way, if we have compassion, if we have love, we can really see the systems that we're creating and creating a world that is justice. And so I think a lot more of love. And Aisha is a good friend of mine, Aisha Siddiqa. She's just a phenomenal person, so I'm glad that you quoted her.
Thanks so much. And let's definitely follow up on this policy piece. Yeah, Steve.
Hi, I missed just people's names and organizational affiliations. Would love to know that among the panelists.
You guys popcorn it. Go for it.
Yeah, I'll get started. Hi, everyone. My name is J Patel. I'm the founder and executive director of One Up Action International. I'm also the youth ambassador for Plastic Pollution Coalition. I do quite a lot of other work and am ambassador for quite a lot of other organizations, but I'm happy to be here.
Could you say the name again of the organization?
Yeah, of course. One Up Action International. One Up Action, so spell it out one. Yeah, One Up Action.
I'm Alex Tan. I'm teaching from Tzuchi University in Taiwan, and that's a few follow-up on your question regarding the coffee cup. I did read some articles that they made. There's a survey that we did, that someone did in Switzerland, that if you put a tag right at the counter, telling say go green, use recyclable cups and utensils. Now research found that it doesn't work. It makes no difference. Yes. But what they found, that if your fellow resident, if they bring their own reusable cup, they have a positive effect. The others will follow. And we found that if you actually maybe your staff at the end of the counter actually mention feedback. Whenever someone who bring their own reusable cup, you mention, thank you for saving the environment. That feedback actually make a difference. That actually positive feedback will actually encourage the user to continue to use that reusable cups. And someone who sees that, oh, the one queuing in front of me is using that, that will have a positive feedback. Hopefully that might be of help to you. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Jane Eisenhart, and I'm a consultant with UN Environment Program. I've been working mostly with our regional office, which is based in Washington, D.C. It's a North America regional office for the US and Canada. And so I've kind of seen the global perspective of the UN happenings around things like plastics, but I've also worked specifically on regional projects that have been really special about plastic pollution along the Mississippi River in particular, where we worked with subnational governments and communities on the ground to identify the source and extent of the problem, but then also look at solutions. So a few different bits and pieces there, yeah.
And then Yupa.
My name is Yupa Stein, and I'm a volunteer with the national organization Beyond Plastics, and they focus on policy regulations. So we're very active in the New York bills to reduce single-use plastics, and they'd be a good resource. I'm also, and they work on training and providing resources for building local grassroots groups. And I am also starting to work with a local organization in Montana called Families for a Livable Climate.
Great, thanks so much, everyone. Steve.
Morning. I'm Amal from MENA Women Coalition. I have a question for you, I think, Jane. So, in terms of, and thank you, DA, about the recycling plastic. When we were going around the center here and we saw the work they are doing in recycling plastic and the use of it and the possibilities are unlimited. The first question we asked, are the big organizations, humanitarian aid organizations, using these blankets, recyclable blankets, and all these reused plastic in their emergency packages, aid packages? And is there a culture for that? Because when we started discussing it, we were like, actually, it's time, isn't it? You have to quickly compile that, make the emergency packet reach the places that are in disaster. But then we know disaster. We know when it's happening often. So is there any policy, any push for this leadership culture and this culture of actually prepare something sustainable, something recyclable, environment-friendly products that are in that package? And even the quality, when we saw downstairs, the blanket is much more respectful for the people who are gonna receive it. Is in a bag, is thicker, is nicer, and it looks really posh and nice. Thank you.
So I think it's, my response is less around policy, and it's more around like there's so much innovation in this space, and so new materials and looking at alternatives to plastics is a growing field, and that's part of what this process for the new plastic treaty is looking at, is building that technological capacity for alternative solutions. And so we want to stop creating plastic products, we want to stop using them and better manage them once they're out there. But also we want to look for different materials. So I think what you're sharing is definitely something that's a part of this whole global process. But part of it is really just financial capacity and resources. Like, it's expensive to do these alternative things sometimes, and I think it's going to be a bit of time until solutions become really popular and more mainstream. So it's a mixed bag of, like, it's a growing field and it's exciting, and so many people are coming up with really good, awesome, incredible solutions. But I think we need more of that backing to make it accessible in all of these different contexts, especially in immediate situations when you really need those materials on the ground now. So we need to be able to have that support to do it alternatively quickly.
Thank you. And that connects to a point that you made, Alex, just around, you know, Suchi has so many volunteers who are sorting through this plastic and through this waste to create these processes. And so there is that, I think there's that like elemental or like fundamental piece of like, we're doing this because we know it matters, because this is predicated on love and share and support. And even like you're saying, like, the feeling of the bag brings a sense of humanity, because you're like, this isn't just another throwaway moment. This is somewhere where somebody thought about me holistically. And so I think there is that immersion of that ethic within these larger systems. And kind of, and because we're such a profit-oriented society and everything is so driven by that ethos of what's cheapest, what's the most effective and most efficient, you know, moving that away from that and looking at it in a much larger circular human rights oriented sort of fashion. It's a hard thing, but I think pushing that narrative and telling these stories is such a change maker. And so Steve, what else we got?
Thanks, Steve. Hey, everybody. That was a great panel. So my question is more so about the systems that are already, or the organizations within the system right now that are so dependent on plastics, and how, I guess, what maybe the treaty would say about that, or, you know, like what are different ways to work around that is, for example, with healthcare for me, right? With chemotherapy, for example, right? It is impossible to give something without plastic. And also when you look at sterility in the operating room, for example, right? That our system is so intertwined with plastics, especially in healthcare. I just wonder, how do we go about addressing that? I guess I know you did a great job talking about healthcare in Taiwan and, you know, the changes Suu Kyi is making, but I just wonder for some of those other aspects, right? How do we work around that? Thanks.
Thanks, Doc. Do you have anything on that, Alex?
Well, I would say that it is actually this is an issue, but it can be done, but with proper coordination and policy. Well, I can give you an example that in our hospital, we actually have task force that actually go in depth and understand that for medical healthcare, medical waste, it's actually very simple that we can just burn them. They are all medical waste, but we take time and effort to actually break down and understand which part of the medical waste that are actually not biohazard, that we can actually just remove them and they can be recycled. So it takes an effort to actually go and do it, carry out it systematically. Then we have made a point that for we have the Starbucks. We have a Starbucks in our hospital in Taiwan. We have a policy with them that they can only serve vegetarian food. Yeah, we say that's for the environment. It's not for Buddhist or for faith. It's for environment. We are going green. And they accept it. So that's the only Starbucks in Taiwan that only serve vegetarian food. Yes. Well, I believe that they are open. We just need more communication. But we need the expert, that task force to actually go into it, to look into it, and see that there is much more room for improvement that it can be done.
Thanks so much. Any other questions out there?
I have one from my side, just loving the panel so far, and would love any reflections in terms of how you've seen successful business engagement, whether it's through B Corps or ESGs, thinking about like the critical role right now that businesses play in perpetuating the problem. How do we bring good faith actors from private sector into this conversation? What does that look like from all of your purviews, whether it's from Jane on UNEP's engagement with private sector, all the way out to Kevin and how we as youth are mobilizing with private sector?
So it'd be great if each one of the panelists would be willing to answer this question. I'd like to start with you, Yupa, if you'd be willing, and then we can just use this as kind of our final answers.
Sure. So businesses and the UN, I like their governments to regulate, businesses to innovate, and individuals to act, that we need all levels. And in business, you know, holding up, sharing the stories of those businesses that are innovating and taking steps to make less plastic in the world. Patagonia is a good example. So.
I was going to come from a different angle of, in my job, I've seen a lot of businesses are willing to have a conversation. And so that's something that's been really exciting. It's just that seat at the table where the private sector is really interested in looking at alternative solutions and looking at what role they have to play. And in the US specifically, our work along the Mississippi River, we've been really working with the private sector throughout this process, recognizing brands are like a big part of this and just looking at how we can address that moving forward. So yeah, I don't have a specific example off the top of my head right now for a company that has done really transformative change recently. I know there are lots of them, but I think that conversation piece has been really exciting for me to see.
Okay. Well, we did some small steps towards saying no to plastic. So what I can remember is that after some education with the undergrads in our university, we have a small program where the undergrads will actually go out to the streets just outside the university, the small neighborhood. And they actually spoke to all the vendors along the streets just outside the university, encouraging them to go green. For it's about 2 steps that if they can first offer that the first step they offer is to ask the consumer whether will they be bringing their own reusable cups, reusable container, etc. And the second step is that if you do that, we will give you a slight discount for the coffee or for the food that you are buying. So because the undergrads themselves are the main consumer of that neighborhood. So we have a relatively positive feedback within that community that the vendors are actually willing to actually take part in this program. But I would say that not everyone, but we are making small progress. The students understand that they play a part as consumer. The vendors understand that they play a part as the producer. So we have a unique situation where we have a positive feedback where that we put that into action. Thank you.
We are all consumers here, right? We all have to go buy groceries. We all have to buy something. And at the end of the day, we all have the voice to make a change. And that's pressuring the companies and businesses to make a difference by making them use less plastics. And one way that I've seen that happen is a lot of young people mass mobilizing and utilizing their voices to really create the change that they want to see. And so I think one thing that I've seen in the business sector, given that, you know, quite a lot of young people do work and are pressuring and putting pressure on the CEOs and the leaders within these industries, a lot of them are scared. They're running scared, by the way. So young people keep on and gonna keep using your voices. Everyone must keep using their voices. And we all have the collective power to really say, no, we're not going to buy from you until you change this one thing. And so what I've seen from a lot of businesses is that they've been changing their packaging from plastic to biodegradable like packaging, or like just alternative like packaging and materials. And that's one thing that's right there. In the clothing industry, a lot of the textiles and fabrics and stuff like that have also been shifting from petrochemicals to, you know, renewable cotton or all these other like amazing textiles and fabrics. There's new innovations coming out from plastics that are that are recycled so that it doesn't end up in the landfill. But how are we shifting that narrative? There's some nuance there, by the way, to new solutions, as in like creating textiles out of thin air. I've seen that happen. That's a solution that a lot of people talk about, or just multiple other solutions and whatnot. We have the solutions. It's now time to start implementing them within our, mass society. And I think it's us as collectively, everyone in this room and everyone who's watching, to kind of collectively use our voices both on a hyper-local level to the global level, from the Plastics Treaty and to education, to kind of continue being that foundational step to really getting the change that we want to see, to get the justice that we want to see, and to make sure that we have an equitable life on this planet. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yes, Steve. Oh, one question online. We can do one more. We're almost at time.
Lovely. Okay, so one quick question online. Are there any ideas in terms of, we spoke a little bit during the summit about finding joy, and rather than inviting people to the struggle, to invite them to the party. And so would love your perspectives. Are there any ideas in terms of finding alternative solutions fun for the consumers rather than a burden on them?
Anybody got anything? I don't know why I look over my shoulder to you, Yupa, when you're right there.
That's a great question. And it comes back to connecting with what you love. And that's, joy and beauty our connection to the world. I appreciate Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, and one of her quotes in that is from Thomas Berry, and he said, "We must see ourselves as a communion of subjects rather than a collection of objects." And there's great joy to be found in communion with the web of life that makes our lives possible.
Thanks. Yeah, I find gratitude goes so far. Again, especially in the face of what scares us or what intimidates us, what keeps us up at night, of finding back that little moment of gratitude and just being grateful to be in this room with you all and to remember that it isn't just us, that there is a collective community of people working on these issues. And it is a struggle, but there's a lot of beauty in struggle, and there's a lot of community in struggle. And I think that's the thing to focus on, is not the hard, but the good. And the reminder of why we're doing this is so important to me, and it keeps me coming back every day into this work. It's the opportunity to jump onto a Zoom or into a room with people who I know love me and that I love, and that we're in this together for those reasons. And so with that, I want to close this down. It's a beautiful, beautiful fall day here in New York City. I want to thank you all for being here, to each one of the panelists for giving their time and talent and wisdom, Yupa for coming in from beautiful Montana and making it down to the valley. If you have any questions or want to follow up, please find us. Find Steve. The Suchi Foundation has done a wonderful job with their website and with providing all the information that we need. So again, a quick round for the panelists and for yourselves, and have a great day.
So much. And so, Yupa, we'd like to ask you to stay online with us real quick so we can take a photo of the whole panel with you in it.
All right, thanks so much, Yupa. And to everyone watching us online, thanks so much for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you on day 7. Goodbye.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, Yupa. Be well. Have a good day.
Thank you.